Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of I've Been Playing. Today we're taking a quick look at God of War Ragnarok. Obviously, this game is still fairly recent and is quite a significant one for many people, so there is very obviously a spoiler warning on this video. I'll try not to delve too much into story specifics, and honestly I don't know if I can because I haven't gotten all that far in the game, but the gameplay itself and the video clips may house some potential spoilers, so proceed with caution. Maybe just listen if you don't want any of the visual aspects of the game to be ruined for you. With that said, let's continue. And yes, I am still ill. God of War Ragnarok is the continuation of the story of 2018's extremely well-received God of War, of course, which reimagined the series in a completely new way and setting while also having ties back to all of the previous titles in interesting ways. The story seems to be quite a long, in-depth one, and between me not being able to have as much time with the game as I would like, so far maybe only 4 hours at time of recording, and not wanting to spoil anything, I won't go into very much detail, or, as I said, can I probably with any confidence. The most I will say is that this installment is set, I believe, 3 years after the first, and so far is focused on helping Atreus find out who he really is and what he's capable of. Also, if you forgot what the story of the first game is at this point, as I mostly had, there's a handy recap option available on the start screen, so don't worry about that. I'd say you could almost jump into this one without having played the first one. I don't know why you would, but you almost could, and you'd probably be okay. As many games do now, thankfully, there are a whole host of accessibility options you can tweak and access from the very start of the game. There's one selection for you that just starts the game as is, and the other is where you can tweak things as much as you would like. I would think most people would likely want to adjust something. I don't necessarily need any of the accessibility options, though I am glad that they're in there. I just tend to do it based on my personal preference. For example, I don't really like button mashing, so I switched to holding a button as an option instead. I also make sure I always have subtitles on just so I don't miss any important dialogue. I mean, that's typically for more dialogue and story-driven games that I'm particularly fussy about that, but that's something I tend to turn on. This is probably one of the most extensive accessibility menus I've seen. There are a lot of things on there that I hadn't even thought about or considered, which is nice. It's nice to see that it's being made more accessible, and from what I can tell, it's gonna be accessible to the largest audience it possibly could be, which is nothing but a positive. The gameplay so far is every bit as fun and feels just as good as you will remember from the first one. There's something early on that changes a bit how combat works. You get something new, and it gives you another option. You'll probably be able to guess fairly easily what exactly that is, as it's related to Kratos' past, and obviously, if you've played those games or seen them, you know probably what you're gonna get. You know what I'm referencing. So that is an option as well, in addition to the axe. That feels just as satisfying to use so far as the axe does, although I personally will never get tired of throwing and recalling the axe because it's just so much fun to do, and that's basically how I kill everything, so that I can keep it at a distance and laugh at it when it gets smacked in the back of the head. You also have skill trees and such for both weapons, your shield, I believe. You can at least upgrade your shield and your weapons as well, but you have skill trees for definitely your weapons and Atreus. They use different XP, so you don't have to worry about that, although Atreus, perhaps because I'm not using him as often as maybe I should, gets less XP than Kratos generally. So there are some fun little moments in the dialogue that are being used in games more and more, I feel, because they're more and more able to do something like this. There's more dynamic dialogue, so what I mean by that is that you go to look at something or interact with something, or you go to an area, even just walk over to an area of a room or a bigger open section, and one of the characters in the room or the area with you will comment on your behavior, or maybe the object you interact with, or whatever you're doing, they'll make a comment about it. As I said, this isn't the first recent game to do this, but it's one of the first I've really noticed it in any significant capacity. It may be one of the first ones I've played that's really done this. to any significant degree, and it just makes the world and the characters feel so much more alive than they already do. Perhaps it may seem obvious given what the first game looked like, but it is once again graphically impressive, and much like the first is all done in one fluid movement, apart from, you know, when you pause or something like that, it's all one continuous shot. It's just crazy how they're able to do this. I don't know how they got away with it, or were able to do it once, let alone twice. I started in the graphical fidelity mode at first, and then switched into the 60 FPS performance mode a little while in, just so I could compare them more side by side. Graphically, I don't really see much of a difference in the textures and stuff like that. I'd probably have to zoom right in on something, and I'm just not gonna do that. And I have bad eyes anyway, so I don't know why I would think I would notice the difference. But obviously the movement is much more fluid in performance mode, much faster. I guess fluid is the main word, the most important word there. I'm not generally worried about FPS. I don't have a big problem switching between games in 30 and games in 60 typically. Obviously I notice it, especially when I switch in the same game like this, and obviously I notice when it's going much more slowly, but I still play on my old systems. I play a lot of indie games and just older games in general. I'm not really bothered about graphics or FPS, to be honest with you. I just want the game to be playable for me, but that doesn't mean it doesn't look nicer, and that it probably isn't helping in combat, because I think it was after I switched it when I stopped dying as much. Another thing in relation to me dying so much, there are 5 different difficulty options, one that is purely story-based, one that is super hardcore, and pretty much anything you would want in between. As I always do, started on the just standard middle option, quote-unquote normal, because I just want to at least start out the experience the way I figured they tailored the game for. It's not to say I might not bump it down, but as I said, once I changed to performance mode, I seem to stop dying so much, so maybe it's fine, but you have options there if you're in it more for the story than the combat, or at least the potential of getting killed in the combat. You have that option. In any case, I'm really enjoying the game so far, and I'm disappointed that I'm gonna have to take some time away from it now. I certainly think it's managed to be a worthy successor to the first game, and I definitely recommend it, especially if you like the first one. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments down below. Obviously keep it spoiler-free or as much as possible, and I will see you in the next one.